And we are live. Hello, friends. Clearly, I am not in my office today. Decided to take the old one wheel out. So I'm just in a park, which means that we could get interrupted, like if a school bus of kids comes, which has happened before. So let me grab the link. And here, I'll go ahead and make sure I don't have any, my email client not up and 1Password and stuff before I share my screen. Share screen. Boom, there we go. Okay, so this is Office Hours. If you've never been to Office Hours before, you're in for a real treat, maybe. This is just an opportunity for me to answer questions, help people out with whatever. And yeah, questions can be asked in here, in Discord, in the KCD Office Hours channel. Or you can join the Zoom, and I give priority to folks who are in the Zoom to answer questions and stuff. So it looks like the last, yeah, we got to play catch up because I missed a couple Office Hours in a row. So I think probably starting right around here. But we do have, is it Jan, or is that, how do you pronounce your name?
I mean, in German, it's Jan, but I've heard everything, so do whatever feels best for you.
I want to call you what you're called. So Jan, did you have a question?
Yes. So I've been working on a blockchain project in Next.js, but then I saw Remix come out and I was like, okay, let me just migrate stuff to Remix because it's fun and the project wasn't that far. But the thing is, with stuff on the blockchain, right, you have lots of client-side code, and the app was very well tested with Cypress in Next.js, and now I want to port these tests to Remix. And the problem there is that I basically, for some of the tests, I need to control the loader, right? Because I want to avoid it hitting the chain for cost reasons, for example, and I cannot spin up a local chain. So the basic question boils down to, how do you intercept requests to loaders? Because I looked at the BlueStack, I looked at your personal website, and sometimes you spin up mock service worker, but that doesn't work for all my edge cases. So I was just curious, how do you mock loaders? How do you test error boundaries in end-to-end tests?
Yeah, so can you elaborate a little bit more on why, or what are the use cases that you're talking about that mock service worker on the server doesn't account for?
Yeah, sure. So I feel like the way that I saw you use mock service worker was, for example, if the loader was hitting a third-party API, right? Like, for example, GitHub, Twitter, and stuff. But this use case is I cannot do that for all the stuff that's happening in my loaders for several reasons. So the way that I was doing it now was I checked out the network tab and I found that Remix hits up like a URL, something underscore data.
Yeah. Sorry to interrupt. I just want to dive a little deeper into, like, what are your loaders doing that you can't mock with mock service worker?
Well, for example, one of them is hitting up. So they're obviously hitting up sometimes chains, certain nodes and stuff. And in this particular case, it's hitting up an authentication provider. And if I would mock the response properly with mock service worker, then there would be implications, like I had to basically build out all the hashing stuff so that the rest works again, right? So if I can just interrupt the requests on the Cypress level as I was doing it earlier, that would be a lot easier.
Yeah, okay. The challenge with that, though, is then how do you test your loader? Like, because there's a lot of your code is going to end up in the loader, and you probably want to have good tests for that, right? So how do you get confidence that your loader is working properly?
Gotcha.
So what I'm suggesting is that maybe it's worth the effort to mock the authentication piece, so that you can get the confidence from your loader. Now, I understand that, like, sometimes if you're using a client library, like I had this problem with Firebase, where it's just, I was using the Firebase library, and they like make a crazy ton of requests that, and they depend on like weird headers and stuff. And I went down that path for a while, and it was just not easy to do. Is that sort of where you're?
That is part of it. Yes, exactly.
Yeah. That was really frustrating for me. And eventually, it wasn't the reason, but I did eventually get off of Firebase, so I never had to go much further down that path. So one thing that you could do for that specific scenario is figure out a way to during testing use a different module than the Web3 module that or the blockchain module that you're using. So yeah, and there are various ways that you could do that via like dependency injection or something like that. There's the get loader context API, or is that what that's called? It's not very often used, but that's basically a dependency injection type of API that Remix allows if you're using pretty much anything but the Remix serve adapter, like the Remix server itself. If you're using like the Express adapter, when you say create Remix request or create request handler from Remix, that's an option to get loader context. In that you say, here is my like the API or the module or whatever the functions for doing all of the blockchain stuff. And so in that you could say, oh, if I'm in testing, then give it this mocked version of that thing. And so then that would be a lot easier for you to mock out just that. Because I think it's a worthwhile pursuit to make sure that you can cover the code that you're writing in your loaders. And so, yeah, so you wouldn't want to go down the route of using Cypress to mock the requests that are made that Remix makes, because in that scenario, you can only handle client-side transitions. You couldn't handle like the initial page load. And so like if you land on a page, all of that data was already requested. And so Cypress can't mock that stuff out anyway. And so you're limited on what you can do, and you're not covering all of your code if you go with the Cypress thing. So yeah, I can't, the only situation where I think mocking in Cypress with Remix is worthwhile is if you are making a client-side only request to a different domain for some reason. There are very few situations where that makes sense, but like one would be if you're using like what's that? There are like different APIs that hit the Google Streets or like address API or something. So if you're doing something like that, then yeah, okay, you can, that makes sense for Cypress. But for anything else, it makes more sense. And even for that, you proxy that through your loader and get a lot of benefits that way anyway. But anyway, most of the time you want the request that you're making to happen in the loader. And so you want to make sure that you're testing that. And so use MSW for like when that makes sense, and mock the module or do a dependency injection thing for the module that is making all those requests if it's really complicated. Does that make sense?
Yeah, thank you. And then the two follow-up questions would be, is the same, does the same also apply for action handlers? And the other question is, how can you, let's say I want to test the happy path, and in the next test I want to test like a sad path. Is there a way to swap out that route on the fly with mock service worker? Because I didn't see that in the BlueStack or your own website.
Yeah, great question. So with MSW, you can swap that out. You use an API called server.use. In the BlueStack and IndieStack, it's not set up to be able to do that though. And the reason why is because you need to have the server object that was created when you said, hey, server.listen, when you gave it the handlers. And that is not accessible in the test code. I think you might be able to require it though. So like if you export it, you should be able to import it. But I haven't tried that. But that's the API that it has. If you're going with the module mock approach, then you could have a module that is your mocked module that's imported when you're doing the get loader context thing. Is that what it's called? I feel like that's not what it's called. I can't remember. Let's find out. Get loader get load context. Yeah, so create request handler, get load context, and here's your whatever blockchain library that you're using right there. So you just import the blockchain library here and expose it there. And then you have like a if process env is test, then then give it the mocked version. So anyway, yeah, so if you're going with that approach, then you could actually import that from your test, call some function that says, okay, switch to sad path, and then you run your action again, or run your test again, and now it's on the sad path. That would be one approach that I would try. Yeah, does that answer your question?
Yeah, thanks. And then so this also applies for action handlers, right?
Yes. Yeah.
Okay.
And action handlers, this maybe should be renamed, but the context is available in action handlers as well.
So, thank you very much.
Yep, absolutely. Thanks, Jan. Cool. We've got Darius and Yuri. I might be saying that wrong. Do either of you have questions before I go to the Discord?
Yeah, actually, also, first off, hi. But
Hey.
I don't know if this is the right place to ask this question, but actually, like, I was playing around with like the deferred stuff, the experimental API, and I found a bug, which I think is a bug, where I tried to defer in like a parent route and a child route, and the entire application crashed. I got like a bunch of like hydration errors in the console. I don't know if that was my fault or if it's just the WIP or.
Yeah. So can you describe a little bit more what you did?
Yeah. So I wanted to defer some data just to make my app feel a little faster because the data I'm getting is really slow. It's from a third-party API. So I deferred data in the root, and then I have another sub-route, the schedule page, that I'm also deferring data. And when I defer data from both places, the app just crashes. Like, I get like a bunch of hydration errors in the console, like mismatched something.
Yeah, it's interesting. I don't know. That sounds wrong. It sounds like that should work.
Yeah.
So I'll bet that Ryan and Jacob would really love to hear about this use case. So if you can make it like a small reproduction to really demonstrate the issue, then that will help them as they finalize the API and implementation and everything.
Yeah, I'll try to make a repro.
Cool. Thank you so much. Really appreciate people like you testing out the new stuff so that when we release it, it's really good.
Yeah, no problem.
Cool. All right, sweet. So for anybody else who's in Zoom, feel free to just interrupt me. Oh, you're unmuted. Is it Yuri?
How do you hear me? Well,
yeah, I can hear you just fine. Can you pronounce your name for me?
Yeah, it's Yuri.
Yuri. Okay, cool.
Yes, thank you for asking. And I'm just bought your course and took first React fundamentals. I got it done. So and just check out what is happening here. So and posted my question actually in Discord. And yeah, that's it.
Is it this one?
Yeah, that's
okay.
This one.
Okay, yeah, I remember seeing this one. So just so everybody's on the same page. Whoops, React fundamentals. Actually, hold on. .netlify.app. Here we go. I actually, when I was publishing these to Netlify, somebody else had React fundamentals for something they were playing around with. And so I reached out to them and said, could I have React fundamentals? Because like all my other workshops are workshop name.netlify.app. And she was like, yeah, sure, that's fine. Okay, so we're looking at the rendering arrays. If we look at the extra credit, here, let's open that up. Move the Zoom thing out of what? Goodness gracious. Yeah, so you'll notice that the highlight doesn't change. Same thing for this as things move around, but then here I'm going to stay with the pair always. So your question is around I don't get why highlight disappears when the inputs are shuffled, and here's how you think about it. So once the key specified as array index is passed, the component uncontrolled wasn't unmounted, and therefore its state doesn't change. So that's why focus stays where it is. But the text inside the input changed, then the highlight is disappeared. Why? Okay, I think I'm a little confused about this bit. Could you elaborate on that?
Yes, so I'm confused why if the state was not changed, so why the highlighted disappeared. I thought this is kind of similar thing to focus, and in that logic, input should have highlighted content in the case the state is off on.
Okay. So I'm still a little unclear of your question, but I will explain this, and maybe it'll just incidentally answer the question. So, in both of these, well, let's start with without a key. So, and for anybody watching, we're talking about, yeah, the key prop here. So, yeah, so that's what we're talking about. In this case, these are inputs to demonstrate some implicit state that is held in the DOM. And so we're talking about unmounting and remounting components. When a component is mounted anew, all of the previous state is gone and it's like a brand new thing. So when you don't have a key, then when things get re-rendered, React doesn't know that the thing that you're rendering is actually exactly the same as the what it was before. It's just in a different place. And so what happens in this case is every single one of these components, and these are inputs, they're going to get unmounted and and React is going to create brand new DOM nodes and mount those brand new. So what that means is, since the DOM node is now gone, the default value that was inside of these, or actually the controlled value is going to be completely altered. And so even as I change this value, that value is going to continue to actually, you know what, probably be helpful to see what the actual code was for this. The value is going to remain because the state is being held by the parent, and that parent is sticking around. And so that state is being maintained by that parent. And we can see that right here. Boom, here's our state. And as I have this, the event come in, we set the items to update the value. So this state is going to persist. So as I'm making changes to each one of these, you can see it's applying to all of them. However, in the case where I don't have a key, as we iterate through all of the items, we're creating these inputs. And on every interval, when we re-render, React doesn't know that our intent was to say, hey, this input is the same as the last time you had a grape input or the purple input. Okay, so because of that, the focus state, the selection state as well. So if we select Apple and then it moves over there, and now it's Apple. React doesn't have any way to say, oh, well, this input is moving. I'm not going to actually delete that DOM node. I'm going to preserve that DOM node. We're just going to move where it is in the DOM. And so focus will be maintained. Selection will be maintained like we have here. Now I've got pair selected, and it's going to follow around because React, it doesn't know, like, did they mean for this input to be the same, or did they re-render a completely different data structure that just happens to look similar to the one before? It doesn't really know. And so the key is there for you to say, no, this is like a unique identifier for this DOM node that you're going to render. And as there are changes, I want that, that DOM node to be persisted between those changes. Did that make any sense?
Yeah, that makes sense. And for what I could get from what you said, so when we specify an unique key, we do have state which is persisting through re-rendering, and DOM node is actually not unmounted and mounted. But otherwise, when key is not set, we have a situation when DOM node continues to in the node in the DOM tree, and focus for some reason stays in the first or in the selected DOM node.
Yeah. So basically, I think what's actually happening, which is leading to this focus being like kept in place. I think React is actually reusing those DOM nodes. It's just updating the state of those DOM nodes rather than deleting the DOM node and making a brand new one. I'm guessing that's what's happening, because otherwise the focus would just go back to the body. And I think the reason that this is an assumption, I could be wrong there, but I'm pretty sure that's the case. And if that is the case, then the reason that it's doing that, my guess is for performance reasons. So it doesn't have to delete, like imagine you had 1,000 of these, deleting all of them and making 1,000 new ones would be a lot slower than just reusing the ones that are already there. So that's part of React's diffing algorithm, and or at least what it's saying, the fastest way for me to update the DOM is to not delete the old ones and make new ones, but just reuse the ones that are already there, and just update their values individually. And so that's why our focus stays there.
Thank you very much. And do you know something about highlighting? Could you guess something about why highlight doesn't stays as focus do?
Yeah. So this is actually a browser behavior. So here, let's do this really quick. I'm going to copy this. Whoops. Put that right there. Okay, so we've got this one down here that's not part of everything else. Oh, how am I? Yeah, here's what I'm going to do. So we'll say set timeout after 3 seconds. Then we're going to take this, say value is whatever. Okay, so then I come over here and I highlight that. And when the value changes programmatically, rats, 0 is not, okay, fine. Let's do input. There we go. We've got our input now. So now we say input. And I come over here, I highlight this. And when the value is programmatically changed, the selection goes away. And so what's happening here is when the value is changed from apple to pear or from pear to G or whatever, when that value is changed, it's changing programmatically. And so the browser just by default is going to remove the selection. But you'll notice if one of these stays in place, sometimes they do, when the rest of them move, like that time, the selection actually stays the same. Let's see if we can, yep, orange stayed, there it is. It'll stay the same until the value is actually changed. So that's actually just a browser behavior, and that's why the selection will remain if the input didn't change, but it gets removed if the input's value does change.
Cool, thanks. And one thank for this nice $0 thing. I didn't know it.
Yeah, actually, so you've got $0, and that is the currently selected input. You have $1, and that's the previously selected input or element, and $2 all the way up to $9 or $. Here, let's see. We'll just make a bunch of them. I think, I don't know, like if it might go forever. Looks like goes to 4. Yeah, so you can go up to 4, I guess. I pretty much only ever use $0. Also, pro tip, you've got jQuery in here, basically. So that's just an alias to query selector. And here's query selector all is $2. So that's fun. So
thank you.
Yeah. And for my OGs in the audience, $R used to be a thing that the React Dev Tools would do, where it would give you the React component instance of whatever DOM node, like whatever rendered the DOM node that you're looking at. But now we just use hooks, so we don't have components instances anymore. So cool. All right, that is it. Any other questions in Zoom?
Hello.
Hello.
A newcomer here. I have posted a question on the Discord. My name is Sin, and I found a solution to my problem. I just don't know if it's the best practice. And I know that there are always best practices for ACT. I'm just not sure if this is the best practice for my question.
Okay, great. So the problem that you had was you had an ACT warning with the test like this, and you fixed it by doing this, right?
Yep, that's correct.
Okay, cool. So I'll answer your, well, first I'll say you want to avoid doing this, where you have a before each that sets up some state. This is because, well, I've actually got a blog post that goes deep into this, and I doubt that your question has to do with that specifically. But yeah, avoid nesting when you're testing. We'll go into why I think that's probably not the great thing to do. Basically what you do is just take this and put it in each individual test. It may seem like it's more work, but it's not. Another thing is, oh, yep, that one's actually fine. That's good. Okay, so you do the click thing. Now, if you're using the latest version of user event, then all events that it fires are asynchronous. And so this user.click, you will need to await that. Same here.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, that's the solution. I just wanted to double check that we're awaiting for the click because I haven't seen any examples. Sorry to cut you off, but
No, you're good.
That's what I learned. That was the solution, and I just wanted to double check.
Yeah, that is it. This is a pretty recent change. There are drawbacks to that decision to make all of these async, but it is more realistic to how things actually work. And so the reason that you got the ACT warning is because this is asynchronous, it will do all the synchronous stuff, and then there will be a tick of the event loop where some ACT or some state is updated after the additional events are fired. And because that tick of the event loop triggered a state update and it wasn't wrapped in ACT, you got the ACT warning. And so basically the ACT warning is just to say, hey, some state was updated, but you didn't tell me you were expecting that, so something might be wrong. That's basically what ACT is all about, which is kind of annoying. But yeah, so that is the correct way to solve this problem. The challenge with this that you might come up against eventually is testing loading states. And I can't remember, there was, I think there was a question on Office Hours 2 or 3 times ago where somebody asked about that. So if you run into an issue with testing loading states, you might look back. I think it was in April or maybe, yeah, probably May. So anyway, but that's correct. Best practice.
Thank you. I'll take a look at the other office hours too. Thank you so much.
Yeah, sure thing. Thanks, Sin. Cool. Anybody else in the Zoom before I go back to Discord?
Hey, Kent, I have a question. So Kent, question, currently it's not, technically related to anything, but I had one doubt. So I read your blog post regarding how to contribute to open source. So my main concern is, so let's say I was currently reading the source code of React Router, right? So I just wanted to know what should be the right approach to directly go into the issues and then, picking up some issues, because, it's not a code base where, let's say when we join a company and we get some bug to work on, then, let's say something is breaking, we inspect the DOM and see what component is breaking and all. But it's a majorly, vast open source libraries, and you don't know anything, you don't have a person to discuss anything at that particular moment. So you are all alone in a vast space, right? So my concern is, so is it a good idea to directly start reading into the source code? So how I started reading React Router was, so I started with the at the topmost layer only. So where we wrap everything in the browser router, and then going into the inside of the library that they have wrapped into providers, and how history is being create browser history is being used. So wanted to have some guidance key, what should be the proper way to start contributing to the open source libraries, which are huge, and you actually wanted to contribute. So directly getting into the issues tab and finding some issues and then working on those, or it's good to start like reading the code base from base index.js and starting with that.
Yeah, that's a great question. And yes, it is definitely different from working on like an app. So the best way to get involved in open source is actually to start with the issues, but not to start like implementing fixes necessarily, but to make reproductions of the issues. And so for the router, for example, if somebody says, hey, I render this, if I click on this and then click the back button, it's not going where it's supposed to, for example. And so if they didn't provide a reproduction, then creating a reproduction is by itself is actually a huge help to maintainers. But also it helps you to start diving in and actually have a similar experience to that feeling of like, now I'm working in an app sort of thing. So making reproductions of issues will help expose you to different APIs. And so when you can reproduce the issue at runtime, then you can start using UDebugger, and you can do what you typically would do in a real app to figure out where the core problem is. You can dive in, put debugger statements, step through all of that stuff. And so, yeah, making reproductions is a huge one. In the router specifically, you definitely want to make sure that that the solution that you have proposed is something that is going to be accepted. And that's not just the router. Most open source projects, this is just good practice, that you find what the problem is, or what you think the problem is, and you propose a solution. And you do that in the issue rather than just going and implementing it. Now, if it's like something easy to implement, then yeah, go for it. But the reason that I say that is a lot of the time, especially when you're new to a project, there is context and there are like things happening that you're unaware of. And so your work might end up not being used. And so that's why I say, like, make sure that you get the green light before implementing it. Otherwise you might be wasting your time. Yeah, so re-implement some things so that you can actually run it. If you can, the next level above that is reproducing the issue in a test. Most open source projects, including the router, have pretty good test infrastructure in place. And so if you can reproduce the bug that has been described in a test, that will help a lot, because then you know when you fixed it that you actually have fixed it. And as far as like, I think that starting with a reproduction, whether it be in a test or in like an actual app, is the best way to start learning an open source code base, because the router itself is actually not a very large code base relative to lots of other open source projects, but especially in really large code bases, it's as you described, is very daunting. And you like, this is not your code, it's not even your coworker's code, so like it's not anything that you're used to. And so having a reproduction kind of gives you a code path that you can follow through to see, okay, so what's happening and why is it happening and when's it happening, all that. So yeah, that's what I'd suggest.
I didn't think of that. Yeah, that would be of great help. Yeah, and also like side by side, like understanding the code base, standalone. So if I start with my own pace as well, so would it be fine if I start with that as well, like side by side whenever I get time? So starting from the base app, how things are structured and in a project, Or let's say what I'm talking about is, let's say I want to understand how the link works in React Router. So starting with my own, understanding, going into the code base of React Router and understanding how link works, and then slowly moving to other parts as well, the day-to-day components which we use from that particular library.
Yeah, sure. So that was actually when I was first getting into learning JavaScript. That was one of the suggestions that was given to me, was to re-implement underscore, which is like kind of been forked into Lodash, but as just like a really good practice for learning JavaScript. And I never did it, but I probably should have, because it would have taught me a lot. So yeah, re-implementing the library yourself would be an enormously powerful way to figure out and learn a particular code base. You might run in, if you start with something like link in the router, you will very quickly realize that the router doesn't expose the things that you need to re-implement that, because like you need access to providers and stuff that you won't have access to re-implement link. But yeah, in general, that's a pretty solid practice to learn a code base for sure.
Yeah. Thanks, Ken. Yeah.
Yep. Sure thing. Cool. Anybody else in the Zoom?
Yeah, I actually had an update on the deferred issue that I was encountering. I did reproduce it, but it turns out I was actually on an older version, an older commit, and when I updated, everything worked fine.
Oh, hooray!
Yeah.
That's good.
Yeah.
Well, I'm glad to hear that. That's good. Maybe they noticed it too. All right, good stuff. Here we go. Logan, I'm gonna just let them know that I'm answering, because this was way back May 21st. Answering now. Okay, that's the HTML question about, oh yeah, the button and the div. Interesting. Material UI uses divs in their loading button component, even though it's invalid HTML. Pretty wild. Must not be that bad. And Josh Como had a solution, and Nextdoll does this. Yeah, it's a tricky thing. My preferred solution is use an accessible on-click handler on the div. Whew. Yeah, that's hard to do. And then also a smaller button within the card that is keyboard focusable. Okay, fires the same action on click. That's what Twitter does. Oh, okay, interesting. Yeah, so that you get the benefit of the keyboard focus, but also the mouse click on the whole button. Yeah, okay, that sounds fine. Yeah. I kind of like that one. I like what Josh says. Yep, so long as you have a way for, so long as when you test it, both keyboard users and mouse users can do what they need to do, then I think that's fine. Cool. Caristo answering now. Hello, Mr. Kent. Hello, Mr. Christo. I have a question related to your article about using React context properly. Basically, I want to know how you would test a component that uses use count inside of it. And it is a dependency on use effects within the component. Okay, so we've got this tree context, use tree. Okay. Yeah, so what's happening here, yeah, probably wouldn't do what you're doing here, but the reason that you're getting the infinite loop is because every single time use tree is called, you're giving a brand new object. So you would need to extract this object so that it's stable, but I probably wouldn't do things this way anyway. And here, let's take a look at this code here. This is the test, and this is the component. Let's take a look at the component first. So we've got this use tree thing. Use tree is coming from the tree context. We get the tree state and tree dispatch. And here's our state. So no dispatch here. And then our tree state is going into, where's our tree state being used? Oh, okay, we're getting the count and count sorted by. use sort count. Yeah, okay, so it's probably this one. Oh, that's, yeah, okay, so this count is an object, and every single time we get an update with set final count, we're going to trigger a re-render. You come back around to use tree, it gives us back a new count object. We come in here and use effect is like, oh, that's new. So we call set final count again with a brand new object. So that's why it's happening. Let's take a look at the test, and we're going to do this differently. So here you have a before each. You set the tree count to do its thing. You have this custom render that renders everything within the tree provider. Fun fact, instead of doing this, you would actually put tree context.tree provider as the wrapper. So look in the render utility in React testing library, and there's a wrapper option, and that's what you would do instead. And then you could just pass the component directly. This is not a component. This is a element, just to be a little pedantic for you, sorry. but yeah, you want to use the wrapper just so that if you ever try to use re-render, you don't have to wrap it in the provider again, and all of that. So anyway, so you're rendering the summary with the provider, but you've mocked out the tree context. You've monkey patched it actually, so that use tree is going to always return this. So what is the way that I would properly test this? If we go into this tree thing you've got, use tree. Yeah, let's see. Well, okay, taking a step back from the example, the best way to test something is to just do what the user does to make the thing happen that you're trying to test. So the user doesn't know anything about context or anything like that. They are interacting with the UI in such a way to make that that thing happen. Also, I just noticed this is recount, and in here it's called count. So maybe there's something something strange going on there. Is there a recount in here? Yeah. Huh. Well, anyway, in any case, even whether it's recount or count, it's we're going to have the same problem. So yeah, in the case where, well, yeah, so like how does the state end up like that? Make your test do that. Do whatever the user does. So are they clicking on buttons? Are they loading some data that has that as the value? Whatever the user is doing, try to make your test do that. Now, sometimes it's hard to do, and so mocking does make a lot of sense. And in that case, yeah, I hate monkey patching like this. You'll want to use jest.mock to mock what useTree will return, and you just make sure that useTree always returns the right value. So let's take a look at useTree. Yeah, it's just the context provider thing. So yeah, well, I've got a, do I have an example of this? Probably somewhere in my, I don't know, do I have 600 or 700 GitHub repos? It's probably somewhere in there. Yeah, okay, so there are a couple of ways to do this. One thing that you could do is actually accept, just accept this as props and then spread props here instead of doing the children thing. And that would actually allow you to override the value in the context. And so you could render the summary with a specific value for your tree provider. Not super huge fan of that, but that is a thing that you could do. The other thing that you could do is actually make a hook in here that is a useTree that functions the way that you need useTree to function. And so rather than, you almost have it actually, except you're using monkey patching rather than jest.mock. But this, you actually don't need this to be a jest function because you don't care about when this is called or anything. So just make it a regular function, make it a regular hook, make it not return an object that can change at random times, make it actually return a stable object. You could either use react.memo or just extract this object to an object outside of the function and just return that every time, depending on what you're trying to accomplish. From here, it looks like you're not doing any user interaction except right there. But that's not going to change the state either. And so like if you wanted to do the minimal amount of changes to your test and have it still work, then all you would need to do is take this object right here and move it to a variable right outside of that function, and it'll work. And it won't be like the other changes I would make in addition to that is I would use the wrapper API instead of wrapping it manually like this. I would not use a before each for this stuff, but I would actually move all of this to a jest.mock right up here. Yeah, and then it'll work. So hopefully that answers your question. Good luck. Take care. All right, Angel. Hello, Kent. I have a question regarding, here, let me say answering this now. Question regarding the last use effect extra credit, specifically the use ref part. Okay, so let's figure out what we're talking about. This is going to be React hooks netlify. Netlify. I'm not sure why it's not auto completing for me because I go there. So yeah, use ref and use effects. And we're looking at the, hold on, last extra credit. Oh no, this is probably this one. We're all the way down. Now Zoom is in my way again. All the way down here. So this is the one where we use reset keys with error boundary. Is this the one that we're talking about? Prev key ref. Okay, here, let's do React hooks. Let me just find prev key ref. So this is on the second exercise. Last extra credit here. Okay. Yeah, prev key. Right, so this is the flexible local storage. I think that's what we're talking about. I don't understand why saving the previous key, if I'm initializing the ref key, assuming the key changed, why prev ref key would have the previous value. Yeah, okay. So if we're looking at this here, I think, if I understand this correctly, that the question is, okay, I've got my key, come down here and I say prev ref key, use ref key. So how does the prev key ref have the previous key if I'm passing it the latest key every single render? I'm guessing that's the question. The answer is that React only takes this key into account on the initial render. Thereafter, it ignores it. And it will only update this, and it actually never updates the current value of this ref. You are now responsible of updating the current value, and that's what we're doing right here. So that's why it's because even though you're passing it and this is getting called every render, it doesn't matter to React. It only cares about it the first time. The first time it will say, okay, we're going to make an object that has this key. The second time it's like, I'm not going to set anything. I'm just going to return that same object that I gave you last time. So that's the answer. Hopefully that answers your question. Okay, McCool, answering now. This question, general question, working on a CR. By the way, for people who are coming into the Zoom and stuff, if you jump in and you have a question, feel free to interrupt me because you get priority because you're in the Zoom. Working on a CRM project with a startup, and I'm using React 17 now. Since React 18 is released, I'm confused whether to update or not because there are lots of use effect hook in the existing code base. Since use effect behaves differently in React 18, I'm not super confident whether my existing hooks will work or not. There are lots of use effect hooks because of live updates and some other features. What's your take? PS, I've started a project with, I should have started this project with Remix. I spent the last 2 weeks learning Remix and loving it. Also, is there any way to migrate from React to Remix given that my routes folder is similar to Remix folder? Okay, great. So first I will say, yes, it sounds like you've got a bunch of problems that wouldn't exist if you're using Remix. And in answer to this question, migrating, yeah, it's actually, you can migrate from React. If you're using React Router, you can migrate from React Router app to Remix in 10-minute increments. And we have, it's in the Remix, I think it's, yeah, in the Remix run docs, we go migrating, yeah, here we go. Migrating your React app, yada, yada, yada. So whoa, whoops. So yes, you can migrate, and the migration can be done in 10-minute increments. Just follow the guide here. And that will actually, honestly, probably be easier to do that at first and then upgrade to React 18. Because frankly, you do get some cool things from React 18, but you probably won't be able to take advantage of them until you're using Remix anyway. That might be something to look into. And the cool thing is you don't have to like halt all development and work on the migration. You can do it in 10-minute increments over time, and eventually you'll be on Remix. Let's say that you're not going to do that though, that you can't migrate to Remix for one reason or another. How do we address this first question of I've got lots of use effects and use effects are different and whatever. Use effect behaves more or less the same, except in strict mode. In strict mode, use effects had a very big change with how it operates because it will run the side effect, it will run the cleanup, it will run the side effect again on initial mount. This to me was a huge mistake. Yes, it does catch some potential bugs, but my golly, does it cause so much pain and frustration for people. I think it was a big mistake. And this is not the first time that I've disagreed with something that the React team has done. It's just, yeah, that is what it is. So you have an option. You could just not enable strict mode. I have mixed feelings about that. I think I have told people that I don't recommend strict mode. I'm feeling a little less like that's a good idea. I'm just mad about how it works now. Yeah, but the other option is just to work through each one of those over time. I don't know, if you think you can migrate to Remix, then migrate to Remix, get rid of all those use effects, and then upgrade to React 18. That is the path that I would recommend if it's possible for you. Okay, good luck. Sorry, I forgot to update my cancellations. So yeah, there was no office hours last week. I was in Atlanta for Render ATL. Okay, Benjamin, we really appreciate your input on this. I'm not sure why you're replying to that. So I'm just answering this now. Okay, so we've got a Remix, just slow response times in dev. Yeah, there have been a couple of people who have mentioned this. And it looks like maybe it's related to allow.js. Yeah, okay, so this, I need to go back to the team on this, where we changed the TS config. I think that was a mistake. I was out of this discussion when we decided to do that. And I just think it was wrong. So there's probably something that I'm missing. Yeah, I don't know. I'm not sure. I'm not sure why that would have changed things. That sounds like, yeah, sounds like a problem. I need to investigate this some more. So, and I plan on doing that. So I don't have time to investigate it right now. But yeah, I'm not sure why that would have happened. And I'm not sure why we need to have allow.js set to true. So yeah, I don't know. Sorry. Any tips how to improve that is learn as needed basis. Yeah, that's for me. It's always been a learn as needed thing. Learn as little as you have to. That's what I recommend. Move on. I mean, unless that's what you want to be in the business of doing. Yeah. Even when I was at PayPal and I was working on Webpack and Babel and all that stuff, I was, yeah, pretty much learn as little as I had to get my job done so I can move on to the stuff that I really needed to get done. I did really enjoy working with Babel, made like plugins and stuff for fun. So if you want to like build stuff for fun, but Webpack is on its, I don't know. Some people will disagree with me, but I think Webpack is on its way out. I wouldn't invest any time into that. Babel, I think, I mean, it's still like enormous and everything. So there's still a lot of opportunity there, but I would invest in ESBuild or SWC or something. Babel, same story. I think, I mean, it's still widely used. We still use it for our, what do we use it for? ESLint, I think is why we have to use it. I'm looking for how we can get it out though, because yeah, it'd be really cool to just use modern, faster tools. So anyway, yeah, learn as needed basis. I will look into this some more. I don't have time to look into it now. Jan, I think we answered your question earlier, so we're going to skip over that. Lewis, hello all. Does anyone know why I can't no longer use this newspaper code structure? This was one of the first blog posts I ever posted back on my Medium blog. And it's pretty wild. I had this thing where I'd say, hey, like, look at this object. And to be able to find out all the properties on it, you have to scroll through like a bunch of stuff. And on the Medium post, I actually had a bunch of spaces between all these comments. So it actually looked a lot worse. It was super annoying. And so I said, hey, how about we just hoist everything up to the top so I know exactly what is being exported from the file. And even for functions, you can do a return. And if there are sub functions, those can go below the return. That's totally legit syntax. And so I just wanted to put everything up. And this is the way newspapers work, is they like have like the cliff notes, and then they expand a little, and then they expand a little bit more. And so then the editor can just like take it and cut it at some point and get rid of all this stuff, and you still have something that's useful. I don't remember where I learned that, but it's pretty interesting. And so that's what I liked. I was like, okay, so this function, this thing has a bar. And if I care about what that bar is, then I'll go to the function, but I don't. So there is a better way. And here's all my exports. And so now if I'm interested in any of those things, then I can scroll down and I can look at those things and see what those are all about. That was my argument for the newspaper code structure. I have since given up on this because it doesn't really yield very many benefits and it's pretty confusing. So yeah, I don't do this anymore. I pretty much, what do I do now? Like, I think maybe the best thing to describe my feelings around this is when to break up a component into multiple components, where it's pretty tangentially related. So maybe not even super related, but yeah, I guess I care less now. That's it. Sorry, I've gone and been jaded or something. I don't know. Okay, and we talked about this one. Syllabus, asking about something. I'm kind of confused about this question. It's a blog post or presentation. You're working on an NPM package. The code is private. That simplified some code based on branch execution. This will help new developers. Oh, yeah. That was split guide, I think. Maybe? No. Oh, yeah. Slice.js. And it was closed sourced. And CDODs. I think I could just go to my GitHub. There it is. Slice.js. Yeah, this was kind of a fun thing. Yes, and it was using AST transformation. It was super, super cool. Watch this.
Cool, thanks.
This will describe what the whole thing was. It was awesome. And I just didn't have time to work on it anymore. But yeah, give that a watch. It's pretty cool. Impressive stuff. I'm not going to say any more about that. Okay, cool. Now we are here. Kishore. Good day. I followed Ractathon. David use effects, synchronize, yada, yada, yada. He refers to not a good place to call API stuff, so just doing it in event handlers. But if it's the first load, how can it be done with use effects? Hope it's clear. So Dan says do API calls in event handlers. I say, how do you do cancellation? David said, I'm not even sure what David in that talk was pretty much just saying use effect is garbage, which in some ways that it is. Here's my solution: use Remix, and you don't have any of these problems. But yeah, so not everybody can use Remix, and so what do? I just use effect. If you want to, you can use XState. That's really the end state for anything that is of marginal complexity or greater. Yeah. Or use effect or React Query. Like, actually, if you're not using Remix, then you really should be using React Query. Just use React Query. And so many of these problems just disappear. Yeah, so that's what I'd say. Do that and migrate to Remix. Okay, good day working on React dashboard. Use React router v6. I need some advice how to implement permissions on routes. Okay, well, without like going too deep into it, use Remix. But if you can't, then we've got this authentication in React applications might be of service. So good luck with that. Sweet. And we are at 10:32. So we're wrapping up. Thanks everybody for showing up and asking questions. Feel free to throw some more into Discord, and I'll get to it, not next week, but the week after that. I'm not going to be available next week because I'm going to be with family. So yeah, thanks everybody for hanging out.